All right, good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Mina Ban. I am the Deputy Director in the Office of Financial Education. So at the CFPB Office of Financial Education, we also conduct research, or at least smart enough to hire some of the scholars in this very room to help us do the research on opportunities to empower consumers or highlight the effective practices to help people achieve financial well-being. For example, our financial well-being scale helps quantify people's financial situation and capability. And our building blocks research into youth financial capability examines the ideal windows of opportunity to engage young people. Our 5 principles of effective financial education looks at the best practices for meeting consumers where they are, starting with empathy. And these two papers by Jeremy and Lewis um, resonates with us because it examines expectations, well-being, patience, and executive function. I'm interested to learn more about how and if these elements relate and how they interact with each other. And with that, I'm going to introduce Jeremy Burke. Does state mandated financial education affect financial well-being? And Lewis Overbach, patients malleable via education intervention, evidence from field experience. Jeremy?
Let me just see if the microphone is on. Is it on? And can they hear well? You can hear well. I guess maybe we.
I can try to speak loudly.
Yeah, okay.
To the best of my ability as well. Great, thanks very much. Thanks to the organizers for putting this paper on the agenda. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. This is a joint work with Michael Collins and Carly, whom you now all know well. And what better way to follow Carly's special session than by taking a closer look at some of her research. And in this paper, we're going to look at the impact of a state-mandated high school financial education on later in life financial well-being. So first, I want to thank and acknowledge the Fenner Foundation for providing support for this research, and also note that the views I'm going to express are those of the research team, not necessarily those of the Fenner Foundation or its affiliated companies. All right, so as we've heard throughout the conference, many people, including Americans, struggle with complicated financial decisions. And as Tadeo was pointing out yesterday, we're moving away from a defined benefit world towards a defined contribution world in which individuals are asked to take more responsibility for their own financial stability and security. At a time, as Lisa was pointing out, the financial landscape is becoming increasingly complicated. So one natural policy response is to try to provide more financial education such that people have more knowledge, skills, and confidence to better manage in this increasingly complicated financial terrain. That's a bit difficult to do at scale with adults for a variety of reasons, but one area where we have more or less captive audience, as Carly was pointing out, is in schools. So as Carly mentioned, in the past 20 years or so, there's been a considerable expansion in state-mandated high school financial education across states and over time. And much like on most of our collaborations, Carly's done a lot of the hard work and heavy lifting already and making my job fairly easy. But there's been this expansion where in the early 2000s, there's only a couple states that had implemented a mandate requiring some form of financial education in school, be it a standalone course or integration into other curricula or courses. But then it's expanded quite a bit in the aughts and the tens, where in 2018, 24 states had implemented a mandate requiring either a standalone course or integrating concepts into other courses or broader curricula area. As Carly mentioned, there is often non-compliance within these mandates. So everything I'm going to present to you, you should think of as intent to treat. But we're going to use this variation over states and across time to examine the effects of these mandates on later in life financial well-being. So we are not the first to do so, and Carly's already summarized all this research, which tends to find positive effects on these objective financial outcomes. But this prior work really focuses on outcomes we consider to be objective. And certainly these are, to be clear, important. But if we think about what we're trying to do with these mandates, I would submit that it's not just to improve savings balances or credit scores, but I think we really hope to have a meaningful impact on individuals' financial lives and hopefully affect their welfare and utility And to get at that, I think it's also important to measure these subjective measures, as Louisa was talking about. So we're going to do that using a recently developed scale by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, trying to comprehensively measure individuals' subjective financial well-being, which I'll talk about in a few slides. So our paper is going to ask, do these state-mandated high school financial education, does it impact later in life financial well-being? And then we're going to focus on heterogeneity across two key dimensions for us. First, we're going to look at whether there's differential effects or whether people end their education after high school. Oftentimes, this is a key target area for these mandates, since by definition, these students aren't going to go on and get additional education in college. They're also less likely to work for an employer that provides financial education. And relative to those who get a college degree, they on average earn less, might have less job security. And so financial mistakes for these individuals might be more costly than for those who go on to get a college degree. Second, we're going to look at if there's differential effects across gender or sex. So relative to men, women also tend to earn less on average throughout their working years, enter retirement with less wealth and less resources, and then have to finance, on average, a longer period of life given greater expected longevity. So again, relative to men, financial mistakes may be more costly for women given their lower resources on average and longer expected lifespans. So when we try to think about how financial education might influence, in our case, expected utility, we're going to build on a model developed in Lusardi, Michaud, and Mitchell, which is a two-period life cycle model, in which you're going to earn income in period 1, consume some of it, save some for period 2. And what governs how well you transfer resources across period is this parameter R, the intertemporal interest rate. And as in Lusardi, Michaud, and Mitchell, we're going to assume that financial education affects this ability to transfer wealth across periods. Okay. In our case, since students are getting financial education in high school, we're going to assume that the parameter cost at the individual level of getting this education is relatively small. As Carly mentioned, it's pushing out some additional content, but often this content is perhaps of questionable value. So for us, we assume this parameter of accumulating more knowledge is effectively 0. So what people can consume in period 1 is going to depend on their expected wealth and their expected income, minus what they choose to save. So then if we solve this relatively straightforward two-period optimization problem, optimal consumption in period 2 is given by this expression 4 here. And so if the educational mandates only affect this parameter R, ability to transfer wealth across periods, then it's going to unambiguously improve expected utility as it will increase expected consumption in period 2. But there might be a secondary effect that it could affect expectations about how much you're going to accumulate throughout your life. And if it positively affects these expectations, then again, it's going to unambiguously improve expected utility. But if it depresses these expectations for some consumers, then the effects become more ambiguous. And if the effects of lowered expectations are sufficiently large, it can potentially outweigh the benefits to increase knowledge. So our proxy for expected utility is going to be the scale developed by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, their financial well-being scale, which they developed after an extensive amount of qualitative interviews and focus groups with consumers. And it's really designed to holistically measure how people are feeling about their financial situation, both now and in the future. Okay, so it's designed to capture things like whether or not people feel in control of their day-to-day and month-to-month finances, whether they feel like they have the capacity to absorb a financial shock, whether they feel like they're on track to meet their financial goals now and in the future, and whether they feel like now and in the future they'll have financial freedom to make choices that allow them to enjoy life. We'll talk a bit more about what's exactly in this measure in a second, but what's important for us in particular is that a lot of this is expectation-based. So it's really important what people think about what's going to happen in the future, which is going to be driving a lot of our future analysis. So the data we're going to use to examine how these mandates might affect our financial well-being is going to come from the National Financial Capability Study, which you heard a little bit about yesterday in Jeremy's presentation. This is national representative cross-section, which is also state representative, repeated roughly every 3 years. And for our purposes, it's crucial in 2018 they introduced the financial well-being measure, which is going to be a key outcome variable for us. We are going to restrict our sample to individuals aged 22 to 45 in 2018. Restricted on the top end as there was not a lot of mandates implemented prior to the early mid 1990s. And so there's very few people older than 45 that are exposed to a mandate prior to graduation. At the bottom end, we want a lot of the educational sorting to have been taking place, post-secondary sorting to have taken place before we conducted our analysis, particularly a sample of individuals who appears unlikely is going to go on and get any sort of college education. And so this leaves us with about 12,000 respondents in 2018. But there's also additional waves of the NAICF's data we'd also like to leverage. So we're going to build a second index, which we call a pseudo financial well-being index, which is going to be related to our financial well-being index, but is a bit more objective in nature. Okay, and I'll talk exactly about what these questions are. The benefit here is that we can measure this in 2012, 2015, to 2018. It gives us a considerably larger sample size for analysis, about 37,000 individuals. And the two measures are certainly related. The correlation coefficient is 0.6, but the financial well-being index is more subjective, and the pseudo financial well-being index is a bit more objective. What are in these indices? So each is based on 5 underlying items. I won't read each one in the interest of time, but I do want to point out how important expectations are, particularly in the subjective indices. So the second item is, I am concerned that the money I have or will save won't last. And this is really expectations about asset accumulation, preservation, and future potential consumption. The third item is, because of my money situation, I feel like I'll never have the things I want in life. Again, this is really about expected future consumption. Even the fourth potential item, my finances control my life, could be expectations to the extent people are thinking about how much this might be true in the future as well. Where our pseudo measure, our PFWB, is a bit more objective in nature. So really the first measure is, can you meet a financial shock? Are you spending more or less equal than your income? This is subjective. How do you feel about your current financial situation? Are you satisfied? Subjective again, do you have too much debt right now? And how difficult it is for you to meet your monthly expenses each month? Okay. So as Carly alluded to earlier, we're going to leverage this variation in states and over time using a difference model with two-way fixed effects. So fixed effects for states and fixed effect for graduation year when the mandate was implemented. Okay, so we're going to estimate the impacts of these mandates on our two indices of interest, controlling for individual characteristics, our fixed effects, and we're going to cluster our standard errors at the state level, which is the level of policy variation. And in the models where we have more than one year of outcome variables, we're going to include survey year fixed effects. So what do we find? So first, focusing on sort of our top level results, we do find that these mandates, at least directionally, impact financial well-being in a positive dimension. Although this difference is not statistically significant, we see very, very similar coefficients on our more objective measure, which is significant given our much larger sample size and greater statistical precision. But I also want to take a look a little bit under the hood and see where in the index these effects might be accruing. And we really see that at the aggregate, it appears to be changes in expectations. Okay, so I should say all of these questions we've rescaled and recoded such that better outcomes are positive. And so we see that after exposure to a mandate, students are less likely to say that the money they have and save won't last, and they're less likely to believe they won't have the things they want in life due to their money situation. So it appears that at least part of the effect of these mandates is to improve expectations on average. We also find impacts in some of the more objective outcomes. In particular, people are less likely to spend more than their income, less likely to say they have difficulty meeting expenses, and also more likely to be satisfied with their current financial situation. So I think this speaks to a lot of the previous research, which also finds outcomes, positive outcomes on some of these more objective dimensions. Okay, so getting to our heterogeneity analyses of interest, let's first focus on effects across gender. When we look at where these at least directional effects are accruing, you see almost all the effect is being experienced by men. And if anything, these mandates appear to be lowering women's expected utility or financial well-being, although the difference here is not significant. The point estimate is negative. And similar story for our more objective dimension, where almost all the benefits on the objective dimensions appear to be accruing to men, although the women's point estimate is positive. It's not significantly different than 0. So again, digging under the hood of where these effects might be accruing, you see that there is a couple dimensions on which women improve on a more objective measure. They're at least marginally more likely to say they're currently satisfied with their financial situation and marginally more likely to have less difficulty meeting monthly expenses. But men just are experiencing larger differences on most of these outcomes, and also are less likely to be spending more than they earn. So there's not a tremendous amount of variation on each of these items across gender, but where we see larger variations is on the more subjective measures. Okay. So we first to notice we don't see any changes in any of the dimensions, any of the items for women. They're all pretty much 0, but we do see changes in men's expectations. Okay. In particular, men are less likely to believe the money they have and save won't last, less likely to believe they won't have the things in their life they want due to money, and less likely to report that their financial situation is controlling their life. Okay. So one of these things, these mandates might be doing, as Carly mentioned, is sometimes they talk about income and earnings, and it might be crystallizing across genders that on average men earn more than women, and this might be conveying a divergence in expectations that women are really crystallizing that they might earn less than men, and doesn't appear to be affecting their expectations in the same way that they're expecting men's expectations. Okay, and then our second dimension of interest, we see even greater evidence of heterogeneity across our dimensions of comparison. So we do see that these mandates appear to be improving financial well-being for individuals who go on to college, but we see stark reductions in financial well-being for those who end their education after high school. On our more objective dimensions, again, almost all of the improvements are accruing to those who will go on to get a college degree. You see directional improvements among those who go on to college but don't graduate with a degree, and almost no benefits among individuals who end their education after high school. Again, digging a little bit under the hood, for college graduates in particular, almost all of the dimensions on our more objective measure improve. There is one dimension on which individuals who end their education after high school improve after exposure to the mandates, and that's they're more likely to live within their means and spend less than they earn, which is great, but it's offset by some reductions on other dimensions in the index. And again, there's some, but not a terrible amount of variation item by item across the educational gradient. We see much starker variation along the more subjective dimension, where it appears that these mandates appear to be depressing expectations of those who end their education after high school. Particularly, they're more likely to say they won't have the things they want in life due to money, more likely to say that the finances control their life, potentially now and in the future, directionally more likely to say that they're concerned that the money they have and save won't last, and also more likely less likely to say that they have money left over at the end of the month. Where the reverse is true for all of on these dimensions for college-educated individuals, particularly those who get a college degree. Okay, so what might be happening with these high school-only students is, again, we might be crystallizing that earnings and employment for those who don't go into college tend to be lower and less stable than for those who get a college degree, and this might be baking into their expectations and oppressing them somewhat, and as they think they're less likely than their college-educated peers to lead financially successful lives. All right, so I'll sum up. So on average, we find that these mandates do improve objective financial situations, like others have found. In particular, after the mandates, people are less likely to spend more than they earn less likely to have difficulty covering monthly expenses, and are more likely to say they're satisfied with their current financial situation. We also find improvements in financial well-being, but only for men and those with college degrees. And most strikingly, we find reductions in financial well-being for individuals who end their education after high school following exposure to the mandates. Okay? And this really appears to us to be divergences in expectations, where these mandates appear to be reducing expectations of those who do not go on to get a college education. So somewhat paradoxically, these policies may be promoting gaps in financial well-being across the educational gradient due to differences in what consumers are taking away in terms of expectations from the education, which suggests to us that current curricula may not be sufficiently focused on individuals who are going to end their education after high school. And perhaps we can have some additional examples or evidence about how individuals who do not have a college degree can and often do lead financially successful and stable lives, and try to drill that home a bit more and really be cognizant of that this group is unlikely to get financial education elsewhere and really should be one of the key focuses of what we try to deliver through these mandates. So I'll stop there and say thanks.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. It's a really interesting paper. I guess even given what you just said, my question's going to go a little bit the other way. Given the results and the difference between men and women and the distinct differences by educational attainment, is it possible that you have two things going on here? The first being that the education gives you the potential for success, but that then income itself is where that success either is affected or not?
That's a great question. So we don't see impacts on income from the mandates. So.
Sorry, right. So what I mean though is that if you have sufficient revenues, then self-control matters, and if you don't have sufficient income, then self-control can only get you so far.
Right. Let me think about. So I think our story is less about self-control and more about expectations of what they think will happen in the future. So I'm trying to think if there is. I don't think there's a direct measure of self-control in NFCS, but you're right. I guess it sort of cuts both ways. One is that self-control and education can be more important among people that have less resources, right? Because mistakes can be even more costly for those individuals. But I have to think more about the self-control dimension.
I was wondering about this measure that you have of how people feel that the finances control their life, and how that may be somehow related to some non-cognitive abilities like self-efficacy, the idea of being in control about my life in general. And I was wondering if this kind of like heterogeneous result for individuals that don't finish high school may be just reflective of something else related to who are the people that don't finish high school that may themselves just have these lower levels of cognitive abilities, or some other variable that's correlated with not finishing high school. So I guess I was just thinking if there can be like a more general statement, it's not just financial, this intervention on financial education interacting with people that don't finish high school, but with people that have lower levels of self-efficacy or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have those measures in FCS, but one thing we have also in the Understanding America study, the panel run at USC, we do have measures of cognitive ability, self-efficacy, personality characteristics. And so we could look at heterogeneity in that data to see if we see similar results across cognitive ability, whether it appears to be differentially affecting those with lower cognitive ability leading to lower financial well-being. We have somewhat smaller sample sizes, so the estimates can be more noisy in the UAS data, but that's an interesting possibility and something we can certainly look at. Yeah, I think you're right that this, particularly if finances control my life, is sort of close to locus of control type measures, which we've seen are important in other financial decisions. Yes.
Do you have a sense of how many or what the percentage of people who graduate from a high school in a state stay in the same state at the time that you're measuring this?
Yeah.
And does it differ by gender? Because given some of your interesting results on gender.
I don't know if it differs by gender. So one of the reasons we also capped at age 45 is because we don't observe where people graduate from high school. So we're using their current state of residence as a proxy. So that's another source of measurement error that's going to attenuate our effects. Mobility in the US is often pretty low, particularly among students who only have a high school degree. They tend to stay very much in state where they graduated. I think we referenced some studies in the paper that by, I think, age 40 or 45, when we're looking at, it's about 90% of people are staying within the state in which they graduated high school. But there is variation. I don't know how much it varies across men versus women, which is something we should probably look at. But that's a good question. But I should say that we think our results are underestimates of the impacts of education for a variety of reasons. One is there's measurement error in where people went to high school. Two, as Carly mentioned, there's sometimes pervasive noncompliance in whether or not these educational mandates are actually implemented. And third is that even in our control states, some people do get financial education in high school. And so all of those are working to attenuate our results. So we think probably the true effects of providing education more systematically through high school is probably quite a bit larger than we estimate. Yeah.
So we've seen in some of our research that it's sometimes not just about the knowledge or the financial literacy, but also how confident people feel about this knowledge. And so especially with this gender gap in financial literacy that we often measure, it's very much related to how confident people feel about the knowledge that they have. And the same is also true for people with lower education. So what I was wondering actually is whether you looked in not just into the facts that people know and how much it influences the financial knowledge level after participating in these courses, but whether it also affects how confident people are in applying this knowledge, because that could be important for knowing more about this gender effect that you're finding.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't have a slide for you on confidence. We can look at that in AFCF's data. There are questions about how knowledgeable do you feel? We can potentially also look at potentially overconfidence. We don't see huge effects. We see positive effects on knowledge when we include don't knows as zeros, but then when we simulate guesses among people who say don't know, we do see positive effects on education, on financial knowledge, but we should look at confidence as well. I think that's a good idea and may be part of the story. You could imagine there's a divergence in effects on education across gender in particular, and confidence in affecting their financial lives, as we've seen in other areas, and men tend to be more overconfident than women, and that might be part of the story is that they may feel more confident in their knowledge than women after this education, which is leading to differences in expectations.
I think we did do that at some point.
And there was it was just noisy, nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe there's also variation in the course content or the type of class that is delivered in terms of also what it boosts. So I could imagine that some of the classes are actually better at also helping people feel confident about their finances. So maybe not in this study, but maybe in a follow-up, you could investigate that. Because I think that could also help in understanding how to design the courses so that they help people that need it the most.
Yeah. So if Carly adds additional data to her.
The hard part is that we know what's happening now in the last 4 years, but what we're studying is what happened a while ago. So it could have been a lot messier then.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sure it's more like, you should do this. Like, there's lots of things happening.
But maybe in the future, when there's more NFCS data in addition to your school level data set, we can look at.
Or someone else in this room.
Other questions? Yes.
Was this the first time that you were using the pseudo scale? And is there anywhere that we could look at the validation metrics for it?
Yeah, Carly has done work with us prior, and it's goes into the nuts and bolts of it. Yeah, and looks more in detail, in particular comparison with financial well-being. So This is not the first time it's seen the light of day, but not, which we look at question by question, sort of to help assuage any concerns about the aggregation across these items. Great, thanks.
Sure, this is. I have a plan B. Hello, testing. This is better. Hello, yes, it's better.
Okay. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Luis Oberauch, and I'm happy to present our work here today, which is joint work with Lukas Menkow and Tim Kaiser. I'm replacing my colleague Tim, who unfortunately couldn't make it. But as I'm a co-author, I think I should be capable of doing it. So yeah, our paper is basically about evaluating a field experiment where we implemented a financial education program in Western rural Uganda, and we investigated its impact on the patients of respondents. And we combined this field experiment with a small meta-study on the emerging literature on the malleability of preferences, and try to add up those two things. So when we talk about time preferences, we mainly talk about patience. Patience, the ability to delay a gratification. And patience is, for us as economists, very important from both a macro and also a macroeconomic perspective. From a microeconomic perspective, the evidence shows that patience is associated with more savings. More patient individuals exhibit better health and are also more likely to invest in their own education, right? But also from a macroeconomic perspective, patience is very important. So when we aggregate patients on a country level, we see also positive associations with country incomes. And third, we see evidence on these intergenerational transmissions of preferences, which may result in persistent socioeconomic inequalities. So when patience is so important, it would be nice to change respondents' patience, right? So there's also some literature on that. So the neoclassical theory would assume patience or these deep preference parameters are stable over time and are very invariant to policy interventions. There's also a recent literature, by contrast, that questions the stability of these deep preferences. And third, there's an emerging literature, an empirical literature, that investigates causal effects of educational interventions on preference, mainly among children and youth. We have some evidence on the malleability of risk preferences, a little bit more on time preferences, and also some evidence on the malleability of social preferences. All of these studies have in common that they investigate youth or children's samples. So the question here is, when preferences are malleable via educational intervention, are these treatment effects limited to these early life cycles? And this is what we want to address in this paper. First of all, we conducted a small meta-analysis with the 9 existing field experiments where we study the causal effect of financial education interventions. Most of them are financial education interventions in patients, measured in incentivized tasks. So not by a survey item, really with incentivized choice tasks. And we want to study within this meta-study the role of age using a heterogeneity analysis. And then in a second step, we conducted this field experiment in Uganda, an RCT, studying the financial education intervention on time preferences with a broad range of ages. So there we will be able to investigate also heterogeneous treatment effects by age. To give you a quick preview, the META study reveals that the effect of these interventions on inpatients are maybe negative, or the effect on patients may be positive, but the 95% confidence band do not rule out completely zero effects or even a small positive effects, as we will see later. But when we run a heterogeneity analysis of that, we see that age indeed explains a large share of these between study heterogeneity. When we then conducted the field experiments, we see the same pattern indeed. We see on average no effect on the respondents' patients, but when we split the sample or conduct a heterogeneity analysis, we see exactly these effects by age. So the treatment appears to be effective for younger individuals, where it doesn't appear to be effective for the broad sample. So let's start first with the META study. What were the inclusion criteria? The RCT, it needs to be an RCT first, and secondly, the patient's indicator need to be measured via incentivized decision experiment and not via a survey item or something like that. So we have a final data set with 9 RCT and 34 treatment effect estimates. We have a wide range of intensities. We have a range of ages, also countries, and as well as sample sizes. When we look at the results, these studies are ordered by age, in fact, and this is the average effect on the inpatients. Most studies indeed report the inpatients measure. I will come back to that in a bit. And we see that most of these effects are located on the left side. And when we look at the META estimate, we see also on average that there is a negative effect on the inpatients, or a positive effect on the patients, if you will. But the confidence band, as you can see, cannot rule out a zero effect or even a small positive effect. When we run a heterogeneity analysis on that, we see, as I said, that age explains the largest share within study heterogeneity. So in the second step, we tried to prove that hypothesis by conducting this field experiment in Uganda. It's an RCT with 1,200 individuals in 108 villages. It's a cluster randomized RCT, as you can see on the map. And the financial education intervention consists of the typical topics you also see in other interventions, like budgeting, saving, credit card borrowing, all these components that have some sort of intertemporal nuance to it, right? And we measured also time preferences using an incentivized choice task, as the other studies in the META study did. When you look at the baseline balance, it's shown that the randomization worked. We also tested for joint orthogonality and also tested that on a richer set of covariates. And everywhere there we see relatively high p-values. So randomization doesn't seem to be a problem. How did we measure time preferences? We used a adapted version of the convex time budgeting task that was published in JDE. It consists basically of 4 budgets, and within each of these budgets, the respondents need to choose between a sooner payment or a later payment. And we are varying the interest rate, we are varying the time frames to investigate the different patients and also timing consistency indexes. So when you look at the 3rd budget, for instance, compared to the 4th budget, it's about the time frame. The delay is longer in the 4th budget, or when you compare the 1st budget with the 2nd budget, everything is the same except the front-end delay is there. So in the 1st budget, it's between 5,400 Ugandan shilling now or 6,000 in 1 month, whereas in the 2nd budget, we have 5,400 shilling in 1 month or 6,000 in 2 months. So the delay is the same, but we shift out this front-end delay to investigate time inconsistency, the so-called present bias. What are our outcome variables that we get from this task? First one is the share of the budget allocated to the sooner payment date. That is also being used in the recent studies. Second, a binary indicator, whether the respondent choose the earlier payment option. And third, we were also using structural parameters. So we assumed a utility function. We maximized this utility function into an Euler equation. And then we were able to transform it into an econometric model and estimate these individual discount factors and also a present bias parameter. You can look the econometric framework up in the paper in case you're interested. So what we first need to do is establish some validity of our impatience measure. And we're doing that by looking at the correlations and compare them to correlations that have already been shown in the literature. We here correlate the two impatience measures with savings, educational attainment, and also the self-reported patients. And we see that impatient respondents tend to save less and also reported less patients in the self-reported scale. We do not see any correlation with educational attainment. We also have run correlation analysis on demographic characteristics, and there we see also correlates that have been documented in earlier work, like correlates with gender and also with cognitive abilities. So I think we were able to establish some sort of validity of our impatience measure. So when we look at the treatment effects, we see, when we look at the first two columns, for the full sample, no treatment effect on our impatience measures. However, when we split the sample, in this case by 25, we see the pattern that we have already seen in the meta study, that there is a treatment effect on the impatience, a negative treatment effect on the impatience. And you may ask, okay, why exactly split by 25 years? Well, there's an empirical reason and a theoretical or cultural reason for that. When we run margin plots, I can show you later, we see exactly there the cutoff value, so to speak. And second, in Uganda, you count as a youth when you are below 25, so to speak. That is the second reason why we used this sample split. So the results are pretty much in line with the hypothesis we got from the meta study. When we do the same with the deep preference parameters, there's the same picture we are getting. No effects on the patients, in this case, the discount factor for the full sample. And then when you look at column 3 and 4, we have an effect on the patients. So the higher the discount factor, the higher the patients. Here you have to think the other way around. But we don't see any effect on the present bias, i.e. time inconsistent behavior. So to sum that up, financial education's intervention appear to be successful when conducted with younger ages, younger groups like children, youth, and young adults. And this could explain an important mechanism that we have already seen in the literature. We have seen that financial education interventions may affect financial outcomes, and we are arguing that this is one mechanism. So the financial education treatment affects maybe more prudent behavior, and this prudent behavior leads to different financial outcomes. We have here 1.5 years between treatment and survey, but it would be interesting to look at long-term effects, 3 years post or 5 years post. So I think this is not the end for now, but it's the end of my presentation. So thanks for listening, and looking forward to questions.
Thank you very much for the very interesting. Can you go back one or two slides? So I have two questions. I think that one of them is very related to what you already were saying. So is it the case that those preferences are more malleable when people are young, but then they would revert back over time? Like what I'm saying is, like, this intervention, is it going to have an effect on the preferences for, I'm in trouble. Do they have, are these preferences going to revert back over time? And then the second question I have is, how do you think about, like, here you have this heterogeneous effect, you have a negative effect for those people that are under 24, but then if you have that on the full sample, you have no significance. It must be that there are some other groups where you see a positive effect or somewhere, right? So what group is that? And does that have any sort of economic interpretation?
Yeah, we are still conducting an analysis on that, also linear terms. And what we see is, I hope we have it here. Yeah, that this is some sort here, the cutoff. And here the confidence band almost don't reach the other line, right? Whereas here, you have a little bit of a different picture. But in essence, from a point estimate view, you're right. This is happening, but not in terms of significance. Yeah. Oh, sorry, what was the first question?
It's like from a policy perspective, if you're able to change people's preferences and then have stability of their preferences over time, then you're done. Otherwise, you have to kind of change your preferences and then make them make a decision that locks them in forever. Right?
Exactly. That's why I said the very good point. That's why exactly we need these long-term effects to be established. Otherwise, you're exactly right. We can't establish that. Yeah, good point.
Really nice study. I liked it quite a lot. One question, was the people that implemented the Convex time budget experiment the same as the financial education? So I'm wondering if part of the effect might be trust, and that when you're willing to accept future payments, you...
Very good point. Very good point. We implemented several measures to tackle that. First of all, we split. There was a split involved. I think it was on one slide. So you get a participation fee regularly, and you split these participation fee between 2 dates. So there's less insecurity for the individuals to take all their money or allocate all their money to one payment date. This is one thing you typically do. And second, in order to establish trust, I mean, these individuals have worked with the company, with the survey company for a longer time. There is some trust established, but we also have asked it in the survey, and it was like 69% said that they trust in getting the delayed payment. Yeah.
Did you ask after the education? Was there any impact of the education on trust, possibly?
No, there was no effect on the trust. Yeah, this was orthogonal. Yeah, good point. Yeah, maybe we should also report that. Yeah.
It's very okay. No, well, we will fix it during the break.
Okay. Okay. So you're finding a different effect than another, well, I guess the Lerman paper is also, this is all the age story, correct? Like, can you contrast your findings with any of the other studies based on the context? Because you have a very specific environment. Like, how does it vary with others that are studying the same early ages? Is it comparable in size? Like,
in terms of effect size, I would say yes.
What is the closest setting to yours? I'm just trying to get at like external validity in particular.
The closest setting to ours would be that one where they cover the risk preferences, and from the setting, COSE al, but they have also a 3 to 4 year post involved, and we have that not by now, but we will have.
I mean
hope.
more like the institutional setting. So Uganda is very different than a lot of other countries potentially in terms of.
Yeah, we analyzed. Thank you. We analyzed country heterogeneity, and there was almost no effect on that. Yeah. So the largest share of within study variability was explained by age first and treatment intensity, which is no surprise. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering if what you are picking up is really a change in preferences or a change in how I value money. No,
Amazing. Yeah.
Thinking
amazing
about
point,
ultimately, this is a financial education intervention. It's making me more aware of my budget. Maybe it's making me more aware of my financial limitations. And then you ask me to allocate money.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that this 6,000, I don't know, the currency means something different, but it's not a change in my time
Yeah.
preferences.
Very important point. There's a little bit of criticism going on these time preference elicitation tasks in the monetary domain, right? Because you have the ability to make arbitrage and something like that. And then you're not really measuring time preferences. You are measuring maybe the interest rates that are currently out there, the market interest rates. We tested for arbitrage behavior. You can do that in this convex time budgeting task by looking at the intermediate choices they make, or if they prefer corner choices, if they see the rewards as consumption or not. But it's still a topic that we critically discuss in the discussion part because we can't get rid of it completely. It's a very important point. But this raises the question, do we have generally different preferences across domain? Do we have domain-specific preferences, right? Am I patient in the financial domain, or maybe impatient in health topics, right? We don't know that yet. So yeah, that's something that needs to be investigated.
Thanks, Luis. Two questions related to the fact of, in order to explain why the youth reacts differently. So the first one is, you have information on the household where they live, in particular the household size, I don't know, the composition. So because maybe that can affect, I don't know, your bandwidth bias related to scarcity of time. So
Yeah.
for example,
In terms of household, they are pretty similar in the sample because they are all small scale retailers in this part of Uganda. So background wise, they are widely similar. Yeah.
And the second point is, why, what about, for example, probably the youth have a higher openness to learning, so they more recently understood how to learn with respect to the
Yeah,
adults.
we tried to investigate treatment intensity, the different levels of treatment intensity. We have also an indicator of that in the data, and there was no effect on that indeed. But it's an important point to mention. Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any evidence in this study or any of these studies in your meta study that these hypothetical choices, this hypothetical choice elicitation is meaningful when it comes to actual financial behavior? So in other words, increases in net savings and so on?
Yeah, very, very good point. Well, to be honest, there's a second paper on that field experiment, and we try to avoid some cannibalization effects that they eat each other up. But I would agree that we should establish this mechanism in this paper to show that the treatment affects preferences and the preferences affect savings. Yeah, to make that mediation analysis. Good point. Yeah.
We still have a few minutes, so
Go ahead.
we might be able to use it. Connected to the previous paper as well of having financial education in school, this seems to add to the benefit of financial education. So I wonder whether you can comment a little bit on the policy implications.
Yeah. So the policy implication would be to start early, right? And also that the financial education program not only affects directly outcomes, it affects a preference, right? And due to changing the preference, it may affect other domains as well. So not only the financial domain. This is a little bit your argument. If there is a general preference that spans across all domains, then we would be able to change also other outcomes, not only financial outcomes of respondents when we start early. Yeah.
Just wanted to tell you that in the law that was voted in Italy for financial education, it will be started in elementary school, contrary to high school, which I think is really important. But I think, we need to start probably earlier, much earlier. And it's really amazing. I have interviewed a lot of people related to financial, people famous in finance. And there is always an experience that they refer to when they were little. So again, this is anecdotal, but it really speaks of the importance, I think, of this socialization or kind of understanding this early on.
Exactly.
So I think later on, I think my dream is to buy a lot of piggy banks or things like this and distribute it to children around the world.
That would be great. Thank you very much.